We all know that the author of these memorable characters is none other than the magnificent Dr. Seuss. But did you know that Dr. Seuss was instrumental in helping the United States to victory against fascism and dictatorship during World War II? Political propaganda has been used to take a stand and spread information, ideas, and rumors across the world for centuries. Propaganda was used during the Reformation, the American Revolution, and even the last Roman Civil War in 32 BC. Propaganda was also prominent throughout World War I and II, and surprisingly, Dr. Seuss was one of the up-and-becoming masters. Theodore Seuss Geisel was born on March 2, 1904 in Springfield, Massachusetts. A child of World War I, Geisel acquired a sense of patriotism that will remain with him his entire life. He was ridiculed throughout most of his childhood because of his German ancestry. So, to prove his American patriotism, he became one of the top U.S. Liberty bond sellers with the Boy Scouts. In fact, he sold so many bonds that he was supposed to receive an award from President Theodore Roosevelt. In 1923, Geisel attended Dartmouth College, where he wrote for their humor magazine, The Jack-O-Lantern. It was there that he discovered his love of humorous writing and created the pseudonym Seuss. In 1926, Seuss studied abroad in England, and that is where he met his first wife, Helen Palmer. To support himself and Helen during the Great Depression, Seuss made money drawing cartoons for advertisements. He became a household name for an advertisement he created for an insecticide called Flit. During his advertising career, Seuss drew cartoons for General Electric, NBC, Standard Oil, Ford, and many more.
Inside every Ford, there are parts, many parts. Each one designed by Ford engineers, designed to fit perfectly to do their job inside your Ford. When any of these parts need replacing, don't get new parts just anywhere. Get them at your dealers. Get genuine Ford parts. They're made to fit right.
And last longer.
As World War II quickly approached, Dr. Seuss found himself increasingly drawn to the war effort. So instead of writing children's books, he lent his creative talents to adult-focused, wartime propaganda and became a political cartoonist for the New York daily newspaper PM. Close friends of Seuss claimed that he joined the war effort because he was enraged by America's attitudes towards the war. He saw the growing threat in Europe and thought Americans were not paying attention or simply acted selfishly because it didn't affect America directly. Dr. Seuss had a surprisingly strong position on the isolationist political climate in the United States, and in this particular cartoon, a mother can be seen reading a book called Adolf the Wolf to two horrified-looking children. She talks about how the wolf chewed up the children and spit out their bones, but those were foreign children, and it didn't really matter. This cartoon is describing how America understood the killings and crimes against humanity occurring throughout the world, but because it didn't affect America, they saw no need to help or do anything about it. As he once said, quote, "While Paris was being occupied by the clanking tanks of the Nazis, and I was listening on my radio, I found I could no longer keep my mind on drawing pictures of Horton the elephant. I found myself instead drawing pictures of Lindbergh the ostrich," end quote. Seuss is of course referring to Charles Lindbergh, the world-renowned American pilot and prominent isolationist. From 1941 to 1943, Seuss drew hundreds of confrontational and thoughtful political cartoons, highlighting not only his disdain for Hitler and the war, but also American inactivity. In his political cartoons, Hitler can be seen as a villain in many forms: a mad scientist creating a Nazi poison, a bureaucrat giving orders to the devil, and a trophy hunter trying to add a Russian bear to his taxidermy collection. However, in contrast, Mussolini was depicted as a bumbling idiot. In one of his cartoons, the Italian dictator furiously pedals a motorbike while tied to a tree. Seuss also instigated controversy due to the stereotypical and racist depictions of the Japanese Americans and specifically the Japanese Axis power Hideki Tojo. After publishing a large number of political cartoons, Seuss joined the U.S. Army in 1942. The Army placed him in the Information and Education Division. There, he created films focused on how American soldiers should behave in occupied Germany.
Not many months ago, these serious soldier artists were the merry men whose pens put life and laughter into Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Barney Bear. Today, they've turned their talents to technical things like thrust and torque, the trajectory of a bomb, the inner workings of intricate flight instruments, things which the student airman must know and which the animated sequence in a training film can best help to teach him. Complex operations or minute mechanical details that the camera cannot capture in actuality are graphically and authentically illustrated in the drawings of these artists.
His most famous films followed the life of Private Snafu. Snafu did almost everything wrong. His egregious example taught basic lessons about secrecy, disease prevention, and proper military protocol.
Casualties, not caused by bullets, caused by sickness, avoidable sickness. In the United States Army, one of the great causes of sickness is diarrhea and dysentery. One of the greatest causes of diarrhea and dysentery is the dirty mess kit.
Chow! Come and get it! Attaboy, fill her up.
After the war, Seuss continued working on Army films. Most of the films focused on life after the war and what the U.S. wanted to do to keep the peace.
The problem now is future peace. That is your job in Germany. By your conduct and attitude while on guard inside Germany, you can lay the groundwork of a peace that could last forever. Or just the opposite. You could lay the groundwork for a new war to come. And just as American soldiers had to do this job 26 years ago, so other American soldiers, your sons, might have to do it again another 20-odd years from now.
Dr. Seuss and his co-workers took great risks to create these films. And because they took a stand, they undoubtedly saved thousands of soldiers' lives, boosted morale, and created a new sense of American nationalism that finally united the country behind the war effort. With the advent of the baby boomer generation, Dr. Seuss decided to leave the Army and rekindle his love of writing children's books. Although he left the political propaganda business, critics say there are subtle hints of political opinion sprinkled throughout many of his works. For example, there's Yertle the Turtle, a book about a dictator turtle who forces his subjects to pile on top of each other's backs so he can rise higher than the moon. Sound like anyone you know? Many of Dr. Seuss's books help children learn how to read. However, some of his stories were met with controversy due to the political themes, such as the Lorax, which shows Seuss's deep hatred of pollution and the need for environmental changes, and the Butter Battle book, which depicts his disgust with the nuclear arms race and the Cold War. Dr. Seuss produced films nearly every year throughout the 1970s, and 2 to 3 books a year almost without pause between 1957 and 1976. However, after 1980 he slowed down, publishing only 1 book a year and then every 2 years until his final book, Oh the Places You'll Go, which was published in 1990. In his lifetime, Theodore Seuss Geisel wrote and illustrated over 45 children's books filled with memorable characters, earnest messages, and silly, witty poems. But let us not forget, he was not just a children's book author. Dr. Seuss took a stand and broadcasted his opinion and started a movement that motivated, informed, and inspired the United States to also take a stand and eventually win World War II.